3D printing is an important piece of technology that can be used to create highly personalized projects. This, among many other reasons, was why my goal at the beginning of the semester was to learn the process of 3D printing. An extremely generic way of explaining the big picture goal was that I wanted to learn how to use 3D printers to create projects more developed than a static model, a bust, or a keychain. Obviously, these types of projects have their place and are a great introduction to 3D printing and 3D modeling, but like I said, I wanted to move beyond that. The project that I ended up deciding on was a Tamiya Gearbox Sumo bot that utilized 3D printed pieces only. This was a good measure to understand 3D printing and modeling beyond a basic or introductory level. To execute this project, I would need to hone my skills using Fusion 360 and understand the 3D printer settings and how they work. I used many resources throughout this process, such as YouTube, 3D printing websites, for research and for learning. But by far, Ken was the best resource that was available to me. So after all that research, all the conversations, and all the knowledge I learned, let's see what I was able to accomplish. First things first, Sumo bots or battle bots, whatever you would like to call them, are not an entirely new idea that I myself developed. They've been done many different ways by many different teachers for many years now. Recognizing this, I wanted to create one that served multiple purposes and could achieve multiple goals. With that in mind, I decided to create a base that had some customizability to it and could have a few different parts that could be swapped out on the fly. The base you just saw was not even close to my first design. I went through many different designs, many different versions, and finally, that's what I landed on. And it works pretty well. When it came to the attachments, I designed a few that would fit in with that base. This first one here is a ramp that could use an opponent's speed or momentum against them. I also created one that was a set of spikes to keep the distance and maybe impale any competitors with weak guards or flawed shells. These pieces clip in and the fitment is nice, tight, and snug, with edges and body lines that match up perfectly. Now, as cool as aesthetics and looking good is, it also has to be functional. And that's why I'm pretty proud of the wheels I created. So the wheels were an opportunity to grow my skills with Fusion and create realistic looking wheels like you would find on an RC car that you would buy at Walmart or in a hobby shop. With these wheels, there's also no need for the rubber bands that you often see to provide the grip. They provide the grip themselves and allow the bot to move free and smooth. Majority of these prints, including the wheels, required zero supports, so the final product was clean and consistent and I was able to save time. Yet even without the supports, this was a very time-consuming process to print all these parts. Once the prints were loaded onto the micro SD, there wasn't much to do but wait. So in between naps and finishing Fusion files to prepare those to print, I was periodically checking to make sure the prints were doing fine and that they weren't going to fail. Now, I believe the timing of the 3D prints was one of the hardest problems. Obviously, if you leave it till the last minute, not that I would ever do that, you wouldn't have enough time to finish it just because of how long these pieces take to print. I had very few print failures due to issues with the printer or the filament. Any issues I did have were almost always a fitment problem, and that was due to my Fusion designs. That was probably the next biggest challenge, was that if I messed something up, I was gonna have to wait a whole nother 3 hours to reprint and retry. These right here are some clips of some pieces that I printed that I had to reprint more times than I'd like to admit due to them not fitting, not sitting in place properly, and really any issue that had to do with them just being the wrong size. And even though there were a few issues with pieces not fitting together, it taught me a lot about tolerances and understanding when you need to maybe scale things down a tiny little bit or bump them up a tiny little bit. So not only was I learning how to fix my pieces, but I also was learning how to fix and repair the 3D printers. What to do when your nozzle gets jammed or when your Bowery tube keeps popping off. There was a lot of valuable information from fixing and adjusting those printers. So let me show you what I have. These pieces here will eventually come together to create a Green Goblin mask from the Spider-Man movies. Now this project involves careful consideration on how you position your pieces when printing, as adding supports in the wrong spot can cause much more time sanding and finishing and really degrade the overall look of the print. It also does involve sanding and finishing processes that the Sumo bots did not. Now we need to create a smooth finish because we are going to paint these masks at some point. In the end, there were definitely lots of successes. Lots of good prints, and there were some failures. Some I still don't even really understand what happened. All I know is that they didn't work. Yet through this process, I've learned a lot about 3D modeling and how to use 3D software, as well as maintenance and the settings that go into 3D printers and what can affect the overall quality of your 3D print. And even though I may have been a few weeks behind schedule, I still feel like I produced a project that I was proud of, and along the way I was also thinking and learning about some other projects and some other ways that you consider integrating 3D printing into a classroom.